Hello, my name is Hashem. I'm a graduate student in physiology, and I'm going to walk you through my website on oculocutaneous albinism. I can, okay. So I broke it down into a few pages: signs and symptoms, affected tissues, gene pathway, treatment, and research, as well as an introduction page, which just gives a broad overview. Started out here just talking about what albinism is. I picked an image of a guy with transluminescent irises. I think it's pretty catchy, kind of draws you in. If you're not aware of what that is, it might pique your curiosity. As well as a little diagram of the heritability pattern of albinism. It is an autosomal recessive inheritance pattern. And talked a bit about who's affected by it and the different types. I found the best way to talk about the types of albinism briefly on an introduction page before I got further into them was just a quick table with the main four types of albinism, their gene, the gene product that's impacted, location on the chromosome, prevalence, and just a brief description about uh, that type of albinism. And then a brief discussion about what causes it. Of course, further later on in the website, we go further into depth on these things. But if someone were to just visit this website, uh, and based off the introduction page alone, I think they'd be able to leave with enough information to be able to explain like what albinism is, if not able to at least go deep into the pathways. So, and I guess I picked that pink font up there too, because it kind of matches like the transluminescent irises there. And I found the best way to talk about tissue as it affects multiple things. Hair, skin, and eyes are the most visible things it'll impact. So I chose to focus on those three. And I first wanted to talk about normal development just to give an idea of like how these tissues develop normally before I went in and talked about the disordered development that would occur in these tissues in people with albinism. And signs and symptoms. I wanted to talk a little bit about how albinism is diagnosed on this page. I put an image of a girl with albinism. Been trying to keep it, on each page I have something with albinism up here. It looks like some sort of bird. Here I have a girl. And I talked a little bit about the signs and symptoms. Again, just like the affected tissues page, it affects multiple tissues. So signs and symptoms differ a bit for each tissue. So speaking about that, I found to be the most concise thing to do. Now for the meat of it, the gene pathways. Again, there's multiple types of albinism, and each one of those types of albinism is caused by a mutation in a different gene. Phenotypically, however, they present generally the same, but genotypically, there's a lot of differences. So, trying to be thorough and talk about at least some of those genes. Of course, I mean, if I were to talk about all of them, like it would take a lot more than what I have here. But there's a lot. I spoke mainly on some of the ones I found interesting, in particular SLC4582. That gene I find very, very interesting. Unrelated to this project, I just out of curiosity, I looked into it a while back. It first appeared in the northern Middle East, actually, this mutation, and spread further into Europe, and is largely responsible for the lighter skin we see in people of European, Middle Eastern, or South Asian ancestry. So it's very interesting, I thought. And then its association with albinism, which is something different than having light skin, because even if you have light skin, you do still produce melanin. People with albinism just don't produce hardly any melanin. So yeah, I really find this gene interesting. Another thing I found interesting is the TEER gene, which encodes the enzyme tyrosinase, which is responsible for a lot of different pathways. I mean, I spoke specifically on the pathway for the creation of melanin, but I mean, tyrosine can be used to make a lot of other like hormones within the body, things such as dopamine. So that's very interesting, I thought. And then I have a little diagram here of how the melanosome works normally and then how it would work in people with ACA4. albinism. And I spoke briefly about the mutations again, trying to keep with the theme, talking about how things work normally a little bit, and then talking about how things go wrong. And then I got into the signaling pathways. There's a lot there. I found this diagram to be very, very helpful. If someone wanted to skip reading, I think this diagram is somewhat easy to understand and can explain it. Now, things with albinism, there's not many treatments, but I wanted to talk a little bit about future treatments, which I found interesting. Like the big thing right now is gene therapy using things like CRISPR and adenoviruses to deliver gene products to help express a normal phenotype versus the disordered phenotype seen in albinism. There's been a patented method of doing so that I found. I'm not sure if it's a FEMA approved, not FEMA, FDA approved treatment, but it seems to be feasible. And I spoke a little bit about research. I spoke again a little bit about the gene therapy, but I also spoke about the stem cell model that was developed to help study albinism as well. And then the animal model I chose was macaws, which I thought were interesting as they're primates. And references, I have a lot of references. I found researching this took a lot, especially because like I talked about all four types of oculocutaneous types of albinism. It just took a lot. If I had a little bit more time, I think I wanted to talk a little bit about like syndromic types of albinism, uh, and then maybe a little bit more about mutations. But yeah, that's my website. Hope you enjoy it.